Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I'm going to be talking about the 1974 sex parody Flesh Gordon as opposed to Flash Gordon. And I want to call out the sex part of sex comedy right up front. I try to keep these videos suitable for all ages, but I can't really talk about this movie without referencing its content, and much of its content is sexually themed. It did, in fact, start life intended to be a full-on hardcore pornographic film, though it is not one in the end. But yeah, if that's not something you want to hear about, this is your opportunity to go watch something else. You're on YouTube after all, and there's heaps of content to choose from. If you're still here, then as the film begins, Earth is being afflicted with unpredictable mass outbursts of sexual madness. People going about their ordinary business on the streets are suddenly all tearing off their clothes to engage in public orgies and so forth. The distinguished Professor Gordon believes the Earth is being targeted by some kind of extraterrestrial sex ray and has asked his son Flesh to bring evidence of the theory. Unfortunately, the small aircraft on which Flesh is travelling becomes the target of one such sex ray. When both pilots join the ensuing sexual melee, the craft begins plunging towards a crash. Alone of all the people on the plane, Flesh has the force of will to drag himself and his girlfriend Dale to a parachute. Good fortune means the pair don't just reach the ground safely, but they land near the isolated laboratory of the maverick scientist Dr. Flexi Jerkoff. I did warn you, it was a sex comedy. Flexi has built a spaceship and intends to track the sex rays to their source and then put a stop to them. Now, that's easier said than done, of course, because the sex rays are no natural phenomenon. Instead, they are the work of Emperor Wang of the planet Porno, who is afflicting the Earth both for the glorification of his goat like god and for his own carnal entertainment. Can Flesh, Dale, and Flexi find allies amongst the peoples of Porno and save the Earth, or is our world fated to become another planet of rampant debauchery? So, obviously, this is a sex parody of Flash Gordon. Unlike most such riffing on a well-known properties kind of parodies, however, in this case, the sex parody predates the official big screen adaptation. Dino De Laurentiis' glam rock Flash Gordon wouldn't hit screens until 1980, 6 years later. Now, Flash Gordon and Flesh Gordon are based on a series of comic strips which were also adapted into black and white serials starring Buster Crabbe, and this movie is so closely based in some respects on the Buster Crabbe serials that Universal Pictures planned to sue the makers of this movie for plagiarism. To avoid that lawsuit, Flesh Gordon's producers added an opening text scroll that stated the film was a parody of the Depression-era superheroes of America's past and should not in any way be confused with the original. Parody, after all, is protected speech in the US. Now, the film was actually made in 1971, but it struggled to get a release. Among other issues, the first cut was refused classification, requiring the removal of about 10 minutes of footage. It was, crossing the line of what you could put in a R-rated film. When the movie did finally get cut down to an R rating, though, and reach cinemas, it proved to be a success with box office rentals well over 10 times the production budget. It even did moderately well with the critics. I doubt there are many sex parodies out there that have a 67% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And I have to say, I like the film. It's certainly got some issues, but overall I found it to be quite a fun romp. So let's dive in and talk about the movie, its strengths and its flaws. Now, for some reason, perhaps the generally limited availability of sexy cinematic content, perhaps a growing scale in the cinematic sex industry of the time, the 1970s saw a brief flurry of surprisingly ambitious sex parodies. There were, for instance, erotic musical comedy adaptations of both Cinderella and Alice in Wonderland during the decade that were, quite opulent and highly budgeted. Flesh Gordon was right at the forefront of this more ambitious kind of sex comedy. It lacks the musical element, but it was surprisingly well funded. It had a production budget of nearly $500,000 in 1971, which converts to about $3.5 million in today's money. Now, that's not much by Hollywood studio metrics, but it's in the vicinity of 10 times what a modern day mockbuster grindhouse company like The Asylum puts into each of their pictures. And to give the filmmakers of Flesh Gordon credit, they spent the money effectively. Most notably, they employed a talented group of young makeup and effects artists, including future 7-time Academy Award winner Rick Baker, whose later work you can see in films like An American Werewolf in London and the Men in Black series. The most ambitious and impressive effect in the film is definitely the towering stop-motion monster, the Great God Porno. Not originally intended to speak, the creature's design proved so expressive that he was gifted an amusing monologue of jaded hipster musings in the actual film itself. These lines are voiced by an uncredited Craig T. Nelson, who went on to fame first in the title role of the successful TV series Coach, and later providing the voice of Mr. Incredible in Pixar's two Incredibles movies. So yeah, puerile sex comedy though it is, Flesh Gordon has got some solid production at its core. Still, make no mistake, this is a puerile sex comedy with all that entails. I mean, the driving force of the core narrative is that Emperor Wang is effectively slamming our entire planet with a dose of Rohypnol. And I think it has to be acknowledged that Flesh Gordon is what you might call a problematic movie in a lot of ways. For instance, its main female character exists purely to 1. Get rescued, 2. Get naked, or 3. Get rescued while naked. The film's humour is deeply lowbrow, invariably being silly, smutty, or scatological in nature, and often 2 or 3 of those at the same time. It's the kind of film where the villain is Wang the perverted emperor of the planet Porno, and the hero has a phallus-shaped rocket ship. But it's also a film that bombards you with so many terrible puns, sight gags, non sequiturs, and other goofiness that it's almost certainly going to surprise a laugh out of you at some point. It got several out of me. And it's a film where, one uncomfortable scene with the Amazons aside, even the cheapest laughs don't feel mean-spirited to me. Insensitive at times. There's a fair bit of homosexuality is funny, right? For instance, which, no, I mean, it's just some people are gay. It's no big deal. But it's not mean, generally speaking. So yeah, this may be a film packed with nudity and knob jokes, but it also has this unabashed energy that helped me enjoy its silly, smutty shenanigans. So I largely enjoyed this silly, puerile sex comedy, and you might too. But if you do enjoy it, I feel I must offer fair warning. Do not make the same mistake I did and watch the sequel. Although planned soon after the success of the original, Flesh Gordon Meets the Cosmic Cheerleaders was long delayed, due mostly to difficulties in getting enough funding, and it did not emerge until a full 16 years later, in 1990, and it was not worth the wait, nor the time it would take you to actually watch it. The big problem is a simple one. It's much less sexy and much more scatological. It's the kind of film that thinks that naming a character Bob Turd is the height of hilarity. And yet, I recognise that Emperor Wang isn't exactly highbrow, but at least it managed to be both a penis reference and have a recognisable link to Emperor Ming from the source material. One reviewer described the sequel film as dismal, and I think that's the perfect word, really. It's a witless, charmless, bog water movie. So yeah, stick to the original. Or, if after watching Flesh Gordon you feel like you need to rock on, fire up the 1980 Flash Gordon movie and let Queen take you on a ride. Next time, let's go for something completely different, the acclaimed film noir drama Key Largo from 1948, which was, among other things, the fourth and final picture to feature one of the most famous Hollywood couples of all time, Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. But that is next time. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you've seen Flesh Gordon, let me know what you thought of it.